and turn it over to Miss Chris to introduce today's trainer.
Well, it's very nice seeing everybody. I've really enjoyed these past few weeks, and I know that, can we get the meeting is being recorded off the screen? There we go. And I'm delighted to listen to this one. Billy Ann Gay is going to be speaking with you. Billy Ann is a appointed member to our board and has already brought a lot to us. She helps us with legislative advocacy and keeping in touch and having that perspective from the works that she does. And I greatly appreciate it. I've known her for quite a while, and I think she's going to bring a lot to you today. So welcome, Billy Ann, and welcome everybody. And we'll go ahead and get started.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Welcome. I know that we're all meeting each other in the middle of our day, which probably looks really different for all of us, but so excited to be with you guys today. I know the programming you've gone through this month looks like it's been top notch, and we're going to continue that conversation with today's group, talking about community advocacy and building those strategic partnerships to achieve goals. I mean, that's probably something that you all work on in your various roles across the state. So excited to have some discussion there too. I promise I won't talk at you for an hour and a half. So a little bit about me. I know that Holly and Chris sent out my bio. I'm a lifelong Tallahassean. I work in Tallahassee and live here now. I currently serve as the Director of Advocacy and Legislative Services for the Florida School Boards Association. And our membership is it consists of the elected school board members in the state. So public school districts across the state each have an elected school board. Those school boards are our members. So that's who we serve in my day-to-day role. On the side, I also have a consulting company called Ed Strategies. I work with education vendors, sometimes school districts or school officials on how to solve problems and build strategic partnerships, and some business development, kind of navigating the K-12 space, which I know is not necessarily your space all the time, but the K-12 space, and then state government. And then, as Chris said, in 2019, I was appointed by President Heather Siskin at that point to the FLAEYC board, and I've stayed on for another term. I've really enjoyed learning more about early childhood education. My mom actually was an early childhood educator for 35 years and just recently retired. But it's always been a part of my life, and it's lovely to kind of connect the K-12 space that I live in day to day, going back to where it really starts, the job that you all do. So it's been a lovely partnership there, and I think that, you know, part of me being appointed to the board and some of the other board members we've been able to recruit has been an effort of FLAEYC to build strategic partnerships for the goals that they have. So it's a cool thing to be a part of that. So just to kind of go over what we're going to cover today, and I hope that we have a fruitful discussion. It's not going to be a one-way thing. We're going to talk about what strategic partnerships are, what that looks like, how we define those, knowing your team, which I'm sure you all do, and identifying some of those needs. There's a lot of things that can get in the way of us doing those assessments, but making sure we're making a conscious effort to do that. We'll talk about some foundations for building partnerships, so where we start, how we make sure we have that strong foundation prior to moving forward. We'll discuss how you can discover strategic partnerships within your communities and beyond. And then we'll talk about maintaining and strengthening those partnerships. And along the way, I'll share some examples of tools that we've developed, you know, obviously to help in the K-12 space, but easily adaptable, honestly, for any organization. So I hope that you'll find those tools helpful as well. So we're going to start off just to kind of get us focused. I know some of us are splitting our work day or taking care of babies. There's a lot of different spaces our heads have been in this morning. So we're going to break you guys up into, I believe Holly has 2 small groups. And I'd like you guys just to do a little classic bell ringer just to get us focused on the topic. And I'd like you to designate one leader within the group. And you guys are going to have about 4 minutes to talk about how you would define strategic partnerships, and then what type of goals you think that these partnerships can help you achieve. So really just kind of getting the broad topic. Again, you'll probably have Holly will something pop up and it'll tell them to go to a room or.
Yep, so on your screen now, it should have popped up for you. I see 3 of you have already gone, 4, 5, and they're gone. There you go.
All right.
And then if Miss Terry and Miss Judy are usually a little bit late. So when they pop in, you can just give them a quick where they're doing, what they're doing. And tell me how long they have.
4 is fine. 3 to 4 is fine.
4 minutes. And then, so at 3 minutes, I'll give them a 60-second warning.
Thank you. How have you been, Chris?
Doing fine. I'm ready for vacation next week. You know, it's like I'm getting through this week going, okay, this is done, this is done, this is done. We are
Gentle reminder, this is being recorded, but the
There you
breakouts
go.
are not.
I'm doing fine. Thank you very much. We're going on vacation next week, go camping near Atlanta, and my son and grandson, and then David from here is coming up. So we'll have a little bit of family with us. So looking forward to that. So,
All right.
yeah, so it'll be good to have them.
You would have been impressed last weekend. I know this is being recorded, but my cousin Dina, her little girl was Hey Hey the chicken in Moana, the play down in Orlando.
Wow.
It was done so well, but they had 15 4-year-olds that were a part of it. I think it was like ages 4 to 17. It was
Right.
It was
It was a hoot, I bet.
It was a hoot. It was a hoot.
Yeah. Did Karen get to go see it, or did?
She didn't. She had to stay here. But
Okay.
seems like there'll be more plays to come, is what it seems
Oh,
like.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
I miss doing that so much. That was, I used to teach community theater to little kids, ages 4 to 7. And I would take storybooks and turn them into plays on the stage. And so we did Pout Pout Fish, we did Brown Bear, Where the Wild Things Are. And one time we actually had all the students create characters, and I walked them through, these are 4 to 7-year-olds, and I walked them through the process of writing a story, and then we performed it for their parents.
That's
and so
awesome.
they, in essence, created, I think we called it a mixed up fairy tale or something like that.
I love
And
that.
it was so much fun. And then I stopped doing it because I got so busy when I was at the Florida League of Cities, and I stopped. And there were some changes within the organization that I was volunteering with, but I miss it. Like, I miss it so much.
It was a labor of love. It was, they came out in their bow and they had they all held a rope. So they
Oh, that would have been a super smart strategy in hindsight.
Sounds like they talked to your mother, Karen, and how she organized the preschool at Junior Zim.
For sure.
Yeah. We used to do a thing in the Junior Zim where you're peanut butter and jelly.
Yep.
Yeah. So the teacher at the beginning was the bread, the teacher at the back, and everybody's peanut butter and jelly. We don't want it to ooze out, you know, so we had to keep it all straight so the peanut butter and jelly stayed in the sandwich.
I think I need that as an adult sometimes.
Yeah. Yes.
Adorable.
Things we did. Or our challenge was we were out in the middle of, you know, all the animals and lions, tigers, and bears on line, how to keep kids organized, you know, so they don't go find that snake.
Mm-hmm.
That was the fun of that.
Or when the snake gets broken out.
Yeah, well, we had those.
Together.
When I think of the things I did, you know, we don't want to think about it. Those are being recorded. Mhm.
Okay, I'm closing at 60 seconds.
Sweet.
And they'll remember this, and some of them will pop back in early, but usually they'll be in the middle of a conversation.
Yeah, that
And it
happens.
just cuts them off.
Holly, we had talked about you connecting Billy Ann and Eddie. Have you been able to do that yet?
You're on
You're
mute.
muted.
I saw. It's not that I have not had time to do it. I completely forgot.
I was thinking Billy Ann, since he lives in town, you'd probably make some good connections with him.
I assume you're not talking about my brother, so we'll follow up on that.
Yeah,
Yes.
this is Eddie.
Absolutely. I'm doing it right
Gonzalez.
now.
Not Eddie Gay. Yeah,
Okay.
I think you know him already.
Welcome back. We're going to unmute if you aren't unmuted yet. Hopefully you guys had some fruitful discussion there talking about how you would define strategic partnerships and what type of goals you think they can help you achieve. So do we want to start with, I'm fine with whichever group leader wants to go first and kind of share out what your discussion consisted of.
Tammy?
Sure, I'll start first. Deborah and Dominique were great thought partners. They did most of the thinking.
Awesome.
So based off of what we were able to parse together, a strategic partnership or strategic partnerships are or is a relationship between two entities. Hopefully they're two consenting entities. Within these strategic partnerships, hopefully there are goals that benefit both entities or agencies that are supported. It's really important to have a strategic plan when you're in a strategic partnership. I mean, strategic is in the name. How can you come together to build services or provide services? And another question that can be asked amongst these two entities is what are we going to give to the partnership to make it work? Because it shouldn't be a one-sided relationship. It should be a mutually beneficial relationship.
Fantastic. Awesome.
Great job.
Yay.
Great, spot on. Do we have two groups or we had one group, Holly?
There should be a second group.
Not everybody at once.
I was in a group with Sharon and Jenny, and we were talking about how a strategic partnership, it can be internal, it could be, you know, with someone outside of your company, but it has to be collaborative and, as Cami said, mutually benefit all parties. And something that Ms. Sharon said that spoke to me was a strategic partnership can help you achieve goals that are currently beyond your reach. Something where you need an external factor to give you that extra push to help you hit that goal.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, those are great points. I mean, even just the discussion and what you guys are bringing up, like between two entities, mutual, it's not one-sided, the planning is key. It can be internal, external. We're going to kind of dive into that, but you guys are spot on. And it sounds like you guys may have some strategic partnerships already at work. Great discussion. So yeah, if we break it down, you know, take strategic as the first part, that's going to be relating to the identification of long-term or overall aims and interests and the means of achieving them. So thinking about what you want the end result to be and planning for that. And then we put that with partnership, and that's an arrangement where parties agree to cooperate to advance mutual interests. I think that key there is mutual. We're going to talk about how sometimes we get a little monocular, and maybe we've assessed our needs and we're looking for that partnership, but we're not thinking about the other side of that.
No.
What now? I thought that was a question. And we're not thinking about the other side of how we too can benefit the folks that we're working with and the stakeholders. Something I want you to keep in the back of your mind is really the purpose of this. And it's a big word, but advocacy, it can take many forms, but that's the act or process of supporting a cause or a proposal or the act of advocating for something. And a lot of times, regardless of what the need is, that's going to be a huge part of this advocacy piece, connecting those partnerships and that strategic plan. So why are strategic partnerships important? I think you guys have kind of highlighted some of those. We're going to dive a little bit deeper in that. And where do we start? Because I think that it's a big concept, and there's, we could probably brainstorm thousands of potential partners or obstacles and all of those things, but really need to start honing it down, and we got to start at the ground level. And that begins with knowing your team and knowing your needs. Your responsibilities are many, and you guys are busy, I'm sure, every day, and you find successes along the way in spite of a lot of challenges that you may see daily. But understanding and having a good idea of what your vision is. Some of you may be site leaders or center leaders. You may serve a different role on a team, but I think regardless of the role you're playing within your team, it's important that everybody knows what that vision is. So where are we going? What are the goals moving forward? How are we going to keep improving, progressing, moving forward? And then what are those long and short terms to get there? Your organization may or may not have a very formal process for identifying this vision and mission, and you might have a very informal process of kind of outlining what those goals are, long-term and short-term. I know here, our current executive director worked really hard, and I know that Chris has been working hard within FLAEYC to try to set the vision and formally get those goals down on paper so we know we're staying on track. So there's a couple ways you can do that. But that's something that if you feel like you don't really have a good idea of what the vision is in your organization, that's something that you should really think about and dive into. And then from there, what assistance do you need? You know, what are you guys capable of? You know, I heard you say in talking about strategic partnerships, they can be internal or external. That's absolutely correct. Some of the assistance may come from within. Other times we know we can't get there. We need that extra push, like you said, and we're going to move forward with external partners. And then what's standing in your way? You know, what are those obstacles? I'm sure that you guys can think about some obstacles right now. Does anybody want to chime in on any that might get in the way of a goal you may have?
People who don't share your vision.
Shared vision is important.
Lack of staff.
I was gonna say that too, Jenny.
Staffing is huge.
Yeah.
I want to say creating a common vision, which involves getting people to shift their mindset about the way business has always been done. So that's a little bit of a process, but I would really focus on and am focusing on changing mindsets because the early childhood industry is changing.
That's absolutely right. I think you're talking about a culture change, and
Exactly.
it could take time. And I don't know a nice way to put this, but sometimes that involves addition by subtraction, and you know, trying to get people on board to move through. I think those are all great points. Any other obstacles you guys can think of? Things stand in your way? We'll talk about some more of those. I think that, you know, they'll probably come out in the needs as we assess those too. So meeting these needs through partnerships, you know, you kind of hopefully identified who you are, what vision you're moving towards, what type of culture you want to have in your organization. And then within that, based on those goals, what needs you have. And these are going to come in a lot of different forms. They can be financial. I think financial needs are tied to pretty much every other need that we may have. Could be human capital. You guys are talking about staffing here. I know that's an issue in the K-12 space. I imagine it's no different in the early childhood space, and having good staff members. Facility maintenance, you know, maintaining your facilities and making sure you're in the state of the art. And these are all needs. Visioning itself. Maybe, you know, in these conversations, or if you really look deep down, you guys don't have a clear vision, and that's maybe affecting the culture and trying to get that common vision on board. That could be a need in itself before you even get to these other pieces. And there's several other things that could pop up as needs within your groups. And meeting these needs through partnerships, I've kind of just brainstormed and I listed some things that you may need that definitely could benefit from a strategic partnership. So fundraising. You know, I imagine some of you get certain funding. You have obviously enrollment tied dollars with, you know, parents paying tuition and that type of thing, or through VPK, some of you. But a lot of times we need more than what's there. And innovative ways to do that involve partnerships internally and externally. Volunteers, you know, maybe addressing some of the staffing issues, even if it's just for special events through a volunteer space. Community support. You know, how do we form those relationships to make sure we can have a community behind us? We're going to really dive a little deeper into that a little bit later in the presentation. The employment pipeline. If staffing is a problem, you know, what partnerships need to be built to make sure that you can get some assistance there and that people know you need that assistance. It's not a struggle that you're taking in on your own. And the enrollment pipeline. You know, a lot of that's going to be a culture thing too. And, you know, the community knowing your story, which we'll talk about. And there's a couple others. Now, public policy, FLAEYC this year, I'm sure you guys are paying attention, was a big part of some big public policy changes that are really taking your profession and early childhood in general just to the next level and making sure that it gets the recognition that it needs. All of these take a village and take strategic partnerships to explore and to find solutions. So where we need to start, you know, I think that we do a lot of things, whether it's fundraising or, building teams and all of those, where we just kind of go out and you start asking, but it's important to get down to the basics. So we've talked about your vision, talked about kind of that internal assessment of what the needs are and where you're going. But in addition to that, I think that we can even take it a little bit closer to the ground, boots on the ground, to get you in a place to catapult you to build those strategic partnerships. So we know that your daily focus every day is to educate Florida students in a safe and secure but inspiring learning environment. And that story there alone is something to get behind. It's something that resonates with everybody, like all parents, everybody has a grandkid, everybody can kind of resonate with educating our young kids to be the future of the state. So I think if you start there and you really start to think about what sets your center or your organization apart from others, and do your families and your team members, do they know what that is? And so as we're thinking about this, I want you to think about, parents of students in your organization. They're at church on Sunday and someone says, hey, we're getting ready to send Johnny, to preschool next year. Where do you have Timmy? What do they brag about? Why do they say they chose you? What are those innovative things that you're offering? Are you? Is it a legacy of tradition and you've always kind of been the go-to in the community? Are you offering, an amazing STEM program for young learners? And that's what's really drawn parents to you. Do you have a community garden and that resonates with a different group? Do you have great achievement results? And people know that kids leave your center reading and that's what they're looking for. Think about what makes you unique and what your value is. If you have a hard time kind of hammering that down, you obviously know that culture of change we were talking about, or the common vision, that's not going to be something that's shared. If it is, we need to keep making sure that we're pushing that through, down to our teammates so that the kids know and the parents know, and then that's how we can kind of broadcast across the community. So another part of that foundation is thinking about, does your community know the value of your center or your organization? And if they don't, why not? Is it manpower, or is it because maybe you're not bragging on stuff you should be bragging on, or maybe you're not communicating with the parents even of the students to let them know all these wonderful things that are happening. So that's a great foundation in itself, to be able to have almost like a brag sheet ready, so your role in that community, the value you bring, and you're able to get ready to have those conversations with those strategic partners. Does anybody want to share, what you think sets your center or your organization apart from others in your community?
I will. Well, two things that I've learned in 20 years of being a director. Most parents look at two things. We can offer all the most wonderful things in the whole world all around and to set ourselves apart. Most parents, when they're looking for some type of childcare, are looking for proximity, which either proximity to their home or their work. And then secondly, they're looking at cost. Thirdly, then they're going to start looking at, what your center, what your program offers. My center is church-based, but one of the things that we're known for is we cater to working families. So we don't really offer the part-time or mom's morning out or anything like that. These spots are for those families that need to work. The area that I'm located in St. Pete, I have a lot of teacher families, a lot of educators. So I don't advertise. I've never advertised ever. And a lot of our families are legacy. A lot of our families are from the community. There's a St. Pete Moms Board. So I know for a fact we've been tossed around there a lot. So when you said, oh, where do you go? Well, we go to Allendale because, oh, that's my kid went there. And we're also really known for most of our kids get tested for gifted when they leave our VPK, just because our VPKs really run a lot like a kindergarten, and we use emergent learning based on the children's, what their interests are versus a cookie cutter curriculum. So they end up actually I don't know, being a lot more prepared. So that has kind of gone around the community. Those are just a couple of things that we've been known for. But yeah, so, but what I've found though, honestly, is that when parents start looking, it's that proximity, that cost. I have some amazing families, a family right now who's devastated that they're leaving us, but because they don't want to leave us, but they got an opening in the school that's directly across the street from their house, and mom's about to have another baby and they have one car. So that's easier for them. So no matter they want to stay.
Factor. I think like convenience and proximity is for families making these decisions and two working parents, or one working parent raising kids on their own, like that's a huge factor. So I think that you kind of nailed that down. I think all of you all with your varied experiences, you've seen the trends over the years and you can identify a lot of these pieces. I think that you bring up a story that nobody on this call should forget, and I'm sure you don't, but how important, especially early learning centers were during the pandemic for families who had to go back to work. A lot of K-12 shut down and there was uncertainty. And I think a lot of your centers were able to bring certainty. And it is important for our economy for parents to be able to have a place that they can rely upon for their kids to go learn and be inspired as young learners so they can go to work as well. So those are all great points. Anybody else want to share about their center? Maybe one more?
I'll go. My center is partnered with JWB, Pinellas County Schools. We have a bunch of partners. And I think because we are affiliated with our club, our center stands out because we have so many partnerships. And we've had parents come back once they have their baby and they start out of my room. And I try to build a really strong relationship with the families. That way, this is the first time their kid's coming to school so that they feel comfortable to keep their child here. I think that's been a really strong point because I've had 4 or 5 siblings now start over again and again. And then they go out in the community and spread that around. And I think that's kind of what sets my place apart too from other art club sites that may not be in the school system.
That's awesome. I think my mom always measured success by having her students' children come back to her. And then it got to the point towards the end of her career that she had, her students were, their grandkids were, it was kind of a neat cycle. But yeah, that trust is really important too, and being a part of that family. I'm sure all of you can share something unique about your center, even if it's just the culture that you bring, or maybe certain offerings or curricular pieces that you've brought in to try to serve the needs in your community. But it's important to remember, and it's hard because I think you guys are always in the trenches, doing the good work. But pride and branding are important. And a lot of times, I can't remember the exact saying, but I think it's, marketing is 50% of what you do and 50% telling people about what you're doing. We're going to talk about some of those pieces to make sure that folks are knowing all the benefits and reasons why they should choose you and what you're offering the community. That's going to help you in building some of these partnerships. So just some things, they do require time or they do require effort, but still building that foundation before we get to an ask or trying to solicit those partners. I think that honing in on your priorities and needs, which we've talked about, that's a huge step in building the foundation. And then building relationships is really what's going to unlock that door to collaboration. So these are just some things that I would suggest that you try to, consciously think about, assess yourself on these pieces. Saying yes to networking opportunities. It is not always easy because they're before work or after work, or they conflict with the work day, or they may take a weekend. But when people invite you to things, try to do that if you can. Maybe it's the local chambers having a cocktail hour just to kind of recruit new members. You have an opportunity to go try to do that and meet new people and see people outside of your normal day-to-day, just to kind of build those relationships within your community, because the roles that you all play as early childhood educators, that's one of the most important roles in the community. And I think people overlook that from time to time. Your hours are long and there's a lot of reasons why you might not be seen at some of these things. But as you're invited to these things or you have opportunities, I always try to say yes. And you never know who you're going to meet or what you're going to learn or what opportunity may present itself just by saying yes and being present. And also saying yes whenever you're asked to help. You know, a lot of you may serve a certain role in your community or folks, they go to you or come to you with certain questions about early childhood and learning and that type of thing. If you're asked to volunteer and you can, do it. If you're asked to, you know, join a task force with the local government, maybe is putting together a task force on the young child. And, you know, if you can, and if you can find a way, try to participate as often as you can, because that's going to help establish you as an expert in your field, which is something I think that all of us would want to strive to be. And when it comes down to it, some of these stakeholders or policymakers, whoever it may be, when they're thinking about, they have a question on a, you know, education, early childhood education funding, maybe, or the best preschool in the community, whatever that may be, you want them to think about calling you, if at all possible. And it takes that building relationship on the front end and sometimes offering yourself as a resource, which we're going to talk about moving forward as well. Something I heard a couple of you guys say, and I know this could be a barb for some of you going through some staffing issues, but trusting your team and your extended work family. So understanding that whatever your role is, maybe you're in a supervisory role, maybe you're, you know, some mid-level management, maybe you're a teacher, so more at the lower totem pole within your organization, but trusting everybody within that process, having an open line of communication, making sure that it's not just the boss who knows the vision and the mission and what the strategic plan is, but everybody's on board with that. I think earlier, I can't remember who said it now, if it was Deborah, maybe Sharon, but having that common vision and changing a culture, that's where that starts in that trust. And when we talk about building strategic partnerships, you never know what you're going to unlock by involving the whole team. You never know who they might know or who their family member, what their skill sets are. And it just kind of unlocks a really different piece. And too often we kind of leave the planning to the top level, and we leave the rest of the team out. You really can have a good harmony if you bring everybody together. And then again, kind of tying in a lot of these suggestions, getting to know potential partners or stakeholders prior to there ever being an opportunity to ask for anything. So maybe, you know, you might have an idea that you might need something down the road, but actually building a relationship with folks before you need to come back to them with, you know, maybe a complaint, if we're talking like city council or something like that, or maybe, you know, another center that we kind of compete with, or with something that you need help with. We always want to try to have an established relationship prior to that tough conversation or that ask. So investing time and energy in relationships. And it takes time and energy. And, you know, you may not have team members who have that time and energy to do it, but finding innovative ways to make sure you can be present and making those connections is going to help you be successful. And it brings us back to the advocacy piece. We talked about that definition earlier. You guys are always going to be advocating on the behalf of great causes for your students and for your staff, and taking that in the community. It can be hard to ask for help. That's a huge part of advocacy. And having those relationships and having the confidence in those relationships to kind of seek the help through partnership is something that we kind of have to bring ourselves to be more comfortable with. So we're going to break up in a group in a minute here, because strategic partners can come in many forms. So what I want you to think about is, let's talk about potential partners, specific potential partners. So it could be something maybe we won't recognize it as much. You can gonna go statewide and then maybe locally. Think about partners. If you have some already, you can list those, or potential partners that are maybe outside of the box. I want you to discuss that with your group. We'll give you, let's say 3 minutes this time, if that's okay, Holly, unless you already have it set it for. And then remember to designate a leader who can share out to the group on some of these. So again, you're gonna talk about potential partners. Maybe just get a list and have that discussion. Any questions? Okay. And if you're having trouble thinking about it, go back to your needs that you kind of brainstormed on. That can maybe help lead you in that direction. Right.
Okay, the button should have popped up for you. And I think Katie is the only, there we go. Timer is now, nope, timer's now set.
Thank you, Holly.
It looked like Terry joined us, right?
Yes, but Judy has not.
Okay.
But she usually sends a message to say if she's going to be late. So I don't know if it slipped her mind or not.
Right.
You guys chime in too if you think there's something that you'd like me to go into or add or anything along the way, please.
You're doing
Just
great.
like how, like for me, I would love just the gentle reminder of why, like how this relates to leadership in terms of this course. Part of the project that they, the reason why I was very specific about like picking you and choosing this topic was because Crystal is going to walk them through like doing some sort of community project for change, like whatever that might be. It might be related to something that they want to change at their center. It might be related to a policy initiative or a fundraising initiative or whatever that's going to be, that they're going to have to go outside of their center walls to facilitate support. And so, and I think that they're all at very different spaces or like places in their career and journey and experience levels at doing this. So just tying it back to why this is relevant to our conversation. But I think you do that in a couple of slides already. So
Awesome. Will do.
It'll be interesting to hear what comes back, because knowing where they are professionally, and they're all in very different places. It'll be interesting to hear where a couple of them,
like, I think that's a good thing to highlight. Like,
yeah, come back from partners, because Katie is in a very different, she's not in a center. She works for an agency and she's the manager of the monitoring department kind of thing. So it's a different, although it'll be interesting to see what she comes back with.
I'm giving them their 60-second warning now.
thanks.
Julie, I don't know if you saw me, I was like counting it down. I had to giggle because I'm sure some of you were mid-sentence. I feel confident.
Okay,
Welcome back. Hopefully you
thank
guys,
you.
we were discussing while you were in your groups that we're excited to hear you guys share out, because I think everybody's at different places in their careers and varying roles within the early childhood education profession. So let's talk about your brainstorms. Let's list some of these partners. Any group can go first.
Okay, am I muted? Oh, no, we came up with a lot of potential partners like the local school board, the health partners, community workers, mental health specialists, child find, early steps and local childcare partnerships. And I also think that the community colleges would make a good partnership for professional development.
Awesome.
And my team members was Jenny and Terry and Katie.
Awesome. Yeah, those are all great partners. And I think, look at community college too for potentially an employment pipeline. I mean, that's a great partnership to think about. Awesome. All right, group 2.
Okay, group 2 was Cammie, Dominique, and Sharon. We kind of looked at it from what the centers needed. Tagging on to your suggestion earlier, we can identify a need that's tangible. You can go out there and just bang it out. Cammie needs books because they get limited numbers of books at the beginning of the year. So looking at the public libraries for the cast-offs that they do, going to foundations such as the Dolly Parton Foundation, going to the school district, as the other group said, to find out what cast-offs they do. But looking outside of her regular organization to try to replenish her books, there are options out there. Dominique thought that her center needed staff, and I think we all could join hands on that.
Amen. Oh.
But, but anyway, I suggested to her the ELC. Really, that's a wrong resource, Dominique. I really should have said the workforce board. There's a current program that's going on now in most regional workforce boards that will allow people to come through their agency. They pay that salary, I think, for 10 or 20 weeks. That gives you a chance for them to get those hours and that kind of thing. And then they become the partner in actually trying to find people for you because they've got to meet the goals of their workforce program. So that's what we did. We looked at our needs.
I think that's a great way to assess that, kind of hones in on your focus. Apprenticeships, I think, are great. That's kind of the model you're talking about there. I think that a lot of times, I know in the K-12 space, the legislature has tried to put a lot of responsibility on, especially at the high school level, of building the workforce. But I've got to sit in on some meetings where we talk about the apprenticeship model, and a lot of that onus falls on the business community because they want good workers too. And I think whenever you see a business willing to invest in human capital to move them through that type of model, I think that's a great way to engage the business community and take some of the pressure off of us as employers or educators. That's a great one. I love the idea of public libraries and trying to be able to not be wasteful, but also meet the need with your books. Thinking of the book thing, I know some of the leadership groups across the state, like Leadership Florida has done it before, and we actually did it at one of our conferences. We will have members, when they come to a conference, bring a book that benefits a center or a nonprofit or something like that. So that's a way you can engage some of the communities. Maybe ask a local chamber, could you do a book drive for us at your next conference, and have them bring one? And so you're engaging a different community whose kids may or may not benefit from that book, but it's a way to kind of bring everybody together for that common vision. And what could be more important than having books in a center? I think too, the way you guys are all thinking about this, I'm glad that we looked outside of education, and you guys are being conscious about what needs are there and who you can go to. Because as leaders in your communities, I think it's easy to kind of be passive, but part of being a leader and part of leadership is not letting things happen to you, but being proactive, not being afraid to ask, not being afraid to make those connections to impact change, instead of just sitting back and hoping that someone will help. So you guys having that world view and a much wider view, even just in your brainstorming, is a really good sign. I think you guys are onto something. Something that I'd be remiss if we didn't discuss is knowing and respecting some of these stakeholders and where they're coming from. So, we've got healthcare practitioners, other childcare community groups, community colleges, or in some of the turf battles there, public libraries, agencies, looking at all of those stakeholders, knowing our needs, which is kind of how we get our focus together for moving forward with the goals, but respecting and understanding all the key stakeholders, what's important to them. What message are they going to receive well, and certain audiences may not. We'll talk about that in a moment too, with making our message count. But understanding maybe their philosophies, what their priorities are, taking the time, again, building that relationship ahead of time to know, what is your local chamber's priorities, and then you can kind of see how your needs could fit into that, or your strategic partnership can fit into it, instead of just coming straight in like a bulldozer with that monocular view. Something I think we see a lot, and I see it in the space I work in every day, is it's easy to inadvertently isolate yourself from other stakeholders, and we kind of come in head to head. And we got to be careful with that too. You know, you guys have competing centers in your community, and there's always competing interests for things like funding and volunteers and staffing. So finding a way to navigate those, and a lot of that, it comes from stepping back, learning about the stakeholders and the key people who are going to be, maybe in the turf that you're now entering into, understanding who they are and respecting that, so you don't get yourself crosswise by accident. And I've kind of just listed kind of alphabet soup, some stakeholders that are just involved in education. But those are all ones that if we learn more about that within your community, you kind of hammer it down there, you have an idea of how your goals can all work together. And then maybe you all can mutually benefit from each other instead of stepping on each other's toes. So that's something to really think about. I'm sure you could all think of some stakeholders whom you need to connect with. Maybe there's somebody in the community you think, I've been meaning to reach out to that group and I haven't yet. Or maybe that there needs to be some repair. And that's part of leadership too, is having that vision to understand those, the politics, shall we call it, local politics on those issues, and make sure we repair those before moving forward, and consider them as we're moving forward too. So along with that, understanding those multiple perspectives, understanding what's important to groups outside of ourselves, that helps us frame our message and make it count. So knowing how to do that, we're going to look over some ideas for putting together advocacy templates. Your advocacy templates we're going to discuss may look really different depending on who your audience is. Now, if you're talking to the faith-based community, there's a certain priority there. Family is going to be important. There's certain things you could really tie into your needs. If you're talking to the business community, you might take it a different direction and highlight other pieces on economic development, on how you're supporting the workforce, and and we can think of different audiences and how we frame those. So talking about a tool that some of you guys may have, even if you're not maybe thinking about it right now, you may have some type of literature or something that you try to get these messages across. But providing basic details and that critical information about your centers, demographics, operations, successes, obstacles, you name it, is going to ensure that community leaders and key stakeholders have an opportunity to be a part of your mission. So sometimes just by sharing some of these key details, maybe you're in an area of high crime and there's been, it's a tough detail to share, but you share about the safety of your center and some of the things that you're doing to work on that. And as a leader, you could be proactive and share that directly with your police department or local law enforcement. And you're giving them an opportunity to be involved in a way that's a strategic partnership, instead of just operating on your own or operating in different silos. That's just one example. I think that some things that you could think to include on your varying templates would be enrollment and service to the community. So how many students are you serving? How many families does that equal? Knowing the professions of the parents, of the students you're serving, and how you're helping the community, that's huge. Student achievement data. We heard earlier about, I think it was Jenny's center, and she was talking about how a lot of their kids, they're advanced coming out, and parents know that, and that's something that draws them to their center. That's an important piece to share. Special programs or offerings that draw parents to your center. We talked about some of those earlier. My mom's program is basically an outdoor preschool that offered VPK, but they were in the middle of a Florida native animal zoo. So the world was it was an open kind of outdoor area, and they had gardens and all kinds of things. It was a very nature-driven curriculum, and that drew parents to hers. So sharing those pieces, so you can bring those folks in. Employment statistics. I think I've heard a couple times from many of you that staffing is an issue. Do people in your community know that? Do the right people who might be able to help you know that? And if they don't, how can we try to rally some support there, or just make sure that the information is getting to the right people so they can help you solve those problems? Funding snapshots. So I know funding for, in your different roles may look different for you, but, are you getting money from the state? And if you are, is that designated in a way? Do people just see that you're getting, let's say, I don't know, whatever, $1 million, but you can say, yeah, but we have to spend those dollars on X, Y, and Z. So it's not really $1 million, it's already earmarked for this. That message is important to you. And another one that's kind of just timely, what was the COVID-19 response, or what is your current COVID-19 response at your center or within your organization, or generally, public safety data. I know that with some of the really tragic events that have happened on like high school campuses and in the K-12 space, there have been a lot of changes, and a lot of the school districts and individual schools are having to message to the community and to the parents on what their efforts are to combat those. Again, if you're not taking that leadership to get your message out there, we can't assume that people know that. Can you guys think of any other topics you could share on an advocacy template? We're going to look at some examples too, but things you think might be worth sharing with different audiences.
So I'm just going to jump in because it's something I'm thinking about. When you say student achievement data, I also think just about the wealth of research that's out there about the value of early childhood in general. So a lot of work has been done by James Heckman, who's an economist, looking at evidence-based curriculums in high quality preschools. So there's one out of North Carolina, there's one out of Chicago, there's one in Atlanta, and there's one somewhere in Kansas, I don't remember where, but a lot of the language that people use when talking about early childhood investments, when they talk about ROI and 7-to-1 returns, is based on his work looking at high quality preschools and Head Start programs. So I would say weaving that in would probably be strategic.
I think that's a great strategic move. I think, it's got like a did you know, and having that evidence-based, research-based data to kind of bring the community in, because a lot of people don't think about these things. And I understand that some of your centers, you may serve some parents who they're dropping their kids off because their kids need care while they're at work. And we have a spectrum of, parenting strategies based on different circumstances. But I think that we're thinking outside of even recruiting parents. We're thinking about other stakeholders and what will catch their attention. So that's a great example, Holly. Terry.
I'm glad you said that, because I was on the State Advocacy Committee meeting last week. And one of the topics came up about educating employers about the services that are provided through early childhood and how that could integrate into a job retention program. A lot of times employers, they need people. I think the governor just, he has June 26th, he's eliminating the $300 weekly unemployment. So people are going to be going back to work. And a lot of those jobs are not going to be jobs that are going to be regular traditional hours, 9 to 5 or 7:30 to 3:30. Parents are going to have to work flex time. And the employers need to know that there are childcare agencies and providers out there that will provide safe, secure childcare services. And I believe there's some legislation out there that all families are eligible for childcare services now. So it's kind of like the employer needs to know as well as the employee. And then there needs to be, and I think this is my case management thing coming in, but there's somebody that needs to make sure that this information is being relayed. If a person ends up being late for work, you don't start penalizing the person right away. Somebody would be in there to advocate, to express why they're late and things like that. I did a program similar to that in New Jersey with the casino industry, and it worked wonders because we just collaborated and we brought all the pieces, the school board, the welfare department at that time, they called it welfare, and the jobs programs. And when employees start to have problems, the employer had somebody on the other side that was there to be an advocate for the employee, as well as keeping the employment rate up. So I think that that is one, if we look at where this money is going and the opportunities are, that would be a great collaboration and partnership. So anyway, dream.
I think, Terry, I think those are great points. And I think you're bringing up another point too, that when we're solving big problems, it can't just be us.
Right.
And our stakeholders, you know, you may have had a turf battle with the school board at one point, but you're going to need the school board to bring them back in. And you've got the employer and the employee, and how can you help that employer? So you're really talking about mutually beneficial pieces, and it's a trickle down. I think that's a great idea, especially in today's world, because I think, you know, there are a lot of decisions that families made during the pandemic that were hard to reverse, or families are having different levels of comfort in coming back to the office, coming back to childcare, whatever that may be, that we can kind of reach to our external partners and show some leadership in trying to impact that culture change. You're talking about a culture change too. It's a great example. Anybody else want to share something else? Or so some of the audiences, and I'll share this resource with Holly if you want. It's the resource that I'm kind of working off of right now is one that we specifically developed for school board members. So it's more K-12 and school districts, but you can really customize that however you need to. But audiences to consider, so your parents, employees, post-secondary, you talked about community colleges or the state college system folks, leadership cadres. So, you know, here in Tallahassee, we have Leadership Tallahassee. It's a local focus group of leaders who apply to be in it, and they solve community problems and issues. They take those on and they have those discussions. You know, can you imagine putting together a pointed, you know, a document for them, maybe a one pager that gives them the information they need to help you solve a problem? That would be kind of neat with local leaders. Chambers of commerce, so those employers that Terry's talking about, faith-based leaders, which I know Jenny probably, you know, works with that in her center already. Your local delegations, so your local officials, and your state representatives and senators who are coming up here, just sharing that information, even if it's not to necessarily solve a problem yet, but it's that opportunity, like we talked about earlier, to be a leader and offer yourself as a resource. You know, they see something like this coming from you, information you already have, and they might get to a problem down the road and think, you know what, like Terry sent me that. We need to get her on the phone and see if she has an opinion on this. Or maybe she has an idea on who we can reach out to solve this issue. Or, you know, that's kind of the opportunity you're presenting for yourself.
I think Dominique had something to say, Billy Ann.
Yes. Sorry, I've got your cameras on one, so I can't see you. I apologize.
That's okay. I was just gonna say how you were saying that we should create a safe environment, and like I was thinking maybe that's something that we could talk about when we're making our snapshot about like how we're gonna make people feel like this is the place they want to come to and feel safe and secure, like with us or within our community.
Absolutely. I think that's becoming more and more, you know, we've seen it from a safety and security standpoint, but from a public health standpoint now too, more people are considering that. And it's probably upping the bar for a lot of you all, no matter what your organization is, to make sure you're communicating how you all are addressing that. And that's a great example. It's another great example.
And it looked like Judy has joined us now. Hey, Judy, how are you?
Welcome, Judy.
She's on
Said
mute.
that she's here, but she's on mute again. And Billy Ann, you said Holly will send something out.
I said, I'll make sure I get this resource to Holly.
Oh, perfect. I just, all of a sudden my dog was attacking the postman and I had to run away really, really quick. So my apologies if I missed something. Sorry, Judy.
I'll catch up with you ladies later. I'm listening.
Great, welcome. So looking at how we can share this information, I think there's a number of ways. We're going to look at some fun ways towards the end of the presentation. But I think that keeping it to like a 1 to 2 page document, or if you have any creative juices and you know how to create like an infographic or something that kind of catches your eye, that can always be helpful. Because, you know, I think there's a million things we can do that we're prideful about, that we know we want the community to know, but we also want to make it digestible. And this is really just a template or a piece to get your foot in the door. Again, establish yourself as a leader, establish yourself as an expert in the field, someone who, your center, your organization can speak on these issues, and they know that they can come to you on these, and you're educating your community, which is a huge piece of advocacy for early childhood education in general and for your center organization. So I think thinking about how you can share those, I think one-pagers are great. Hand delivering those on those meetings that you're networking with others if you can, or just kind of, broadly sharing those to the appropriate audiences when that time is right. I think if you happen to use social media or anything like that, again, establishing your organization or yourself as a leader, getting that information out to the general public. And it's just general public advocacy for early childhood education. Everybody on this call knows how important that is. And unfortunately, a lot of times the general public doesn't quite get it. So using that is a good place too. And I think too, word of mouth. It's part of that culture. We go back to the beginning. Part of being a leader is creating that common vision and that culture coming from the top down there, so everybody knows what we're prideful in, what we value, what we're working towards, which community advocates and which community stakeholders we're developing strategic partners with to get that message across. Make sure you bring everybody into the fold, and that's just going to create better staff members for you too, and they really can have confidence in your leadership. And you'd be surprised, teachers at that point, or some of your staff that may be under your supervision, they're proud of those efforts, and they're going to start sharing those efforts, and it will just kind of get that snowball rolling for success. And I think too, just even if it's information, it's not the ask yet, but strategic partnerships will almost fall out of the sky. Partnerships you hadn't thought about before. You will have people call and say, hey, I got a hold of this document and I saw how, your return on investment within our community, or how you're keeping, our employees come into work because you guys are providing this opportunity. Have you thought about working with me on this? Or I'm putting together a task force on employment after the pandemic, and we want you to be a part of it. Those are the type of things that start rolling and really help expand your network. So I'm going to show you a couple. I wonder how this will work. So I'm on full screen. I'm going to take off full. And these examples, this is the document that I'll send to Holly. And again, this is really directed for K, a lot of things are K-12, but the first page of this document is kind of walking you through some of the things we've been discussing. So ideas of why these advocacy templates are important, who your audience is or to consider, what you can share, and then how to share it. A couple examples, again, they're K-12, but Martin County School District has this that they edit from year to year, and they frame, this was specifically made.
Leanne?
Yes.
It's still on your slide deck.
Oh, it is, okay.
Yeah, you just have to click that green up at the top. It's not the stop share button, but new share, and then select the right
Select
window.
it, okay, gotcha. Hold on. Do you see it now?
There we go.
Okay,
You got it.
So we'll go, I was talking about this page. This is the document I'm going to send Holly. But it just kind of walks our school members through the idea process. And then we used a couple examples that are being used in districts across the state. This is from Martin County. It was specifically crafted for their legislative delegation. So as they were getting ready for the legislative session, they wanted their legislators to understand, this is how much money we get for these different buckets. This is what that means here in Martin County, and kind of looking through what those asks are too. Mental wellness. Obviously a huge topic, especially coming out of the pandemic. We already were kind of underfunded on a lot of mental health across the state. They then went into, because it was timely, COVID-19 instruction. So what did they do, for their parents and families to make sure they could get back to school in a safe and secure way? And then now they're telling these state policymakers that story, instead of having a lot of assumptions or just seeing what you see on the news, right? So they're taking control as community leaders to try to have an impact. I left this in there because I think it's important. They were at that point, this was in draft, and they realized that a need in their community was broadband for a lot of their students, particularly given the virtual instruction they had to do. So they were going to add something in there about that. They addressed school safety and then some of the local funding issues based on their tax levy, which is a little bit in the weeds. But they also end with just really simple data. How many schools do we have? How many students are we serving? What does that snapshot look like in our community? A different type of document came out of Monroe County Schools. Can you see that, Holly? I think you guys should be able to see it.
Yes, sorry, I was on mute.
It's okay. This is really driven to demographics. So it was important for Monroe County, which is, based on their property values, it's one of the richest counties in the state. And so they get hammered by people all the time who have a lot of assumptions. They really wanted their local officials and their state officials. So they were looking from a public advocacy or policy standpoint. They wanted them to know what it looked like in their communities and what types of students they were serving and which schools those students were in. So they really got data heavy. But I think that, when you're looking at grant proposals or partnering with nonprofits who might have a certain focus on how to be a community partner and strategic partner, this is the type of document that you can dive into, really different from what we just looked at, which was more of a state funding snapshot that really tied it back. This one's more demographic driven, but it also breaks again down like what their schools look like locally. And, they even go into the private school data. So their legislators were informed, those policymakers knew it. And they include additional research for them to go to. So establishing themselves as a resource. And I know in particular, these two school districts were able to really be leaders for the K-12 space during this legislative session because they're providing these types of resources to community leaders who point back to them. And they say, hey, that's who you need to call if you need information on X. Or that problem sounds too big for us. Let's reach back out to the school district and see. That's kind of the goal, I think, with some of these resources we really want to be able to get to. And any thoughts or any questions on these processes? I know this is not early childhood, but just giving you an example. Okay. Can you guys picture like a template that you could put together or like an audience you think this would be helpful for, just informing them to build that background for strategic partnerships?
Yes, we've done a little of that here at our school. We are an inner city preschool in an area where we're considering creating a safe zone around our school. So we've approached our legislative delegation to potentially talk about some funding to buy up some property that surrounds this facility and getting ready to work with the city where we're located to find out through CRA dollars if there are funding available to help with that initiative. But working on creating a safe zone around the school, the Early Childhood Center. So we've developed that one-page kind of story ask.
Awesome.
And,
but it sounds like even just there, like there's multiple stakeholders who would have an invested interest in that.
That is correct.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Great example. Thanks for sharing, Sharon.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right, I don't want to mess this up. Let me go back to my.
You got it. It's up.
Okay, sweet. So we've
But
talked.
it is still on. It's not full screen. Just FYI.
Gotcha. I don't know what I do without you.
Boom. Perfect.
Sweet. So keeping in mind, which like from our first discussion on the first bell ringer, you guys totally have this down, but partnerships aren't one-sided. So thinking about, and it takes some time and effort. And I know that that's especially with your staffing issues, that some of you right now that might seem overwhelming, but I think you think about the weight or the importance a document like this could carry and the impact, the community impact it can have, and how many people in your communities are choosing to take on that leadership role and share this information. I think that be that person, and it's just going to come back to you tenfold with strategic partnerships and options there. So it sounds like you guys have a lot of strategic partnerships. You have an idea of how you could capitalize on some of these or start identifying some of those needs and how to build those. But we need to then maintain those partnerships and grow them moving forward, whether that means expanding to new partners or continuing to mold the partnership you have for more of a mutual benefit on both sides. So building those relationships we talked about and investing that time and investing in relationships with people, that's going to be a key factor here. And it can really be as simple as being a good friend. So if we're thinking about ways that we can maintain them, super simple, thank them. You know, handwritten notes, those are huge. We just did the FLAEYC race, and you know, we obviously were asked to raise some money and bring in sponsorships and things, and I received a handwritten note from FLAEYC, like that's over there in my handwritten note pile, because that stuff matters. And I think that partners love that, you know, whether it's a handwritten note, or, you know, getting social. If you guys have a social media account or something, you can give a sponsor or a partner some love. You're letting the community and your, you know, work family, so the families that send their students to your center and your team, you're letting them know, hey, we're out in the community, we've got partnerships, and you're saying thank you in a way that's very public. I think that that sends a really great message. Extending invitations. So, you know, this could be to, you know, politicians within your community or state level policymakers, inviting them to come see your center when it's safe and when we're back to normal operations. Inviting them to events. You know, maybe you're doing a ribbon cutting for the new garden or the new playground or whatever that might be, or your new safe zone once you get that deal struck. And you bring them out there to be a part of that. That's all an opportunity to show the good things you're doing to people who it might not be in their radar. That's never a bad thing to do. I know there's some obstacles. You'd have to make sure that you have all the safety considerations, all those things prior to inviting people into your campuses. But that's something I think that is always fruitful. Giving back. So, you know, somebody helps you, they scratch your back, finding a way that you can be involved. I think a lot of times we get hung up when we're thinking about these things we think about finance or sponsorships and that type of thing. Remember, the strategic partnerships we're talking about, finance is a tiny piece. There's 1,000 ways that we can all help each other and become involved. And if we're not giving back in that, we're not meeting that mutual partnership, we're making that one-sided. So to try to do that whenever you can. Explore new ways to collaborate. You know, so remember, we're not just asking somebody and saying disjointed. We've created a foundation for a relationship. It's more of a friendship. It's one of those things, and it's mutual. So having those conversations, sitting down, assessing how things went and adjusting as needed, or saying, hey, that worked out really well. Like, do you have any thoughts on how we could grow it next year? Or is there a way that we could make this more mutually beneficial for you? Those are going to let partners see that you're innovative, and that you're willing to help them as well. And then, you know, something that takes probably the most time, but is probably the most important, is providing updates on those successes. You know, here we do an annual report. I'm sure you may do something like that, or a newsletter and little pieces like that. Framing that for some of these strategic partners. And remember, strategic partners can also be parents, right? So maybe it is in your newsletter or whatever you send out, letting them know, hey, do you remember when we asked for your help on X? We were able to collect 178 books from the local chambers conference last weekend. They were a great community partner for us. You know, send a thank you note here. Little pieces like that, letting people know you helped, we recognize it, we're grateful for it. Here's the results from your partnership with us. People love to see that. I think it's important. And it's a way for you to kind of gauge that success. Something that I put together, and it's kind of cheesy, but it's a fun way to work on advocating. And I think there's ways that you could tailor this tool too. I'll make sure that Holly has the link for it. But bringing your teams in or volunteers and that type of thing and tracking success, this was specifically built to increase like legislative advocacy. But if you're trying to work on community advocacy and leadership, there's ways you could set it up. And we called it advocacy bingo. And we were able to provide essentially like CEU points for our members who participated in some of these tasks. But it's anything as simple as, you know, if you get tagged by a legislator in a positive post about your center or your school, that was a point, because that means you've established a relationship, they're a part of your community, and they're touting something positive about your school or your school district. That's something we wanted to see. They could also tag a legislator themselves or visit a legislator's office. Invite a public official or community stakeholder to an event at their school. A lot of things you guys could do too, all building strategic partnerships. This document has a legislative focus, but I think you see how you could like adapt this to set some goals for yourself. And then we also encourage them to host a town hall or to, you know, be a community leader set up a town hall that involves maybe, you as a center leader, a chamber leader, and a faith-based professional, and maybe somebody from the school district, and you guys are talking about an issue that affects your community. So little things like that, that just bridge gaps. And it's before you need to ask for extra funding, or before you need to have somebody help you navigate the CRA for new land for the safe zone. It's establishing yourself within your community so the strategic partners come as you're moving forward. Any questions about this document? I know it's a little cheesy, but kind of a fun way to track it. All right.
I'm already envisioning like a bingo happening at graduation, guys. So just FYI.
Yes, it's I like games. I like to stay engaged, and it's a kind of a fun way to track it. So as we're nearing the end, I want to try to have time for some questions and stuff. We are going to break you up one last time. We're going to try to get this done in 3 minutes, and we will share out. But if you can identify one specific challenge and one potential partner, so kind of bringing it all together, that you think could help you meet that need. And then I also want you guys to see if there's any additional questions you have or comments that you want to share too. And we'll have that discussion when we come back into the big group. So I think I've got 118. I think 3 minutes should be good if you can do it that way. Thank you.
It'd be interesting to see what they come back with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love hearing like the different perspectives.
Yeah.
Geographically, I guess I have that on the list probably, right? Like where they're all from.
We have
mostly
most
Central
of
Florida.
them are Central and South Florida.
Okay.
So we have like along that corridor, like kind of in the, we have one in Manatee, I think 2 in the Tampa Bay area, 2 in the Orlando area, and 2 in the South Florida area.
Okay.
I'm missing one. Oh, there's a third. Where is she? She's, oh, and then there's one in Winter Haven. So that's more Polk County.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's one thing FLAEYC needs to do, Billy Ann, is get more people involved from other parts of the state.
Yeah,
Well,
we had 2 from North Florida, and then things happened and they just had to drop off.
Right,
Gotcha.
right.
And when I say North Florida, we had one in Okaloosa and one in Jefferson. So surprisingly, where we have like some of our more active folks, like here in Tallahassee, nothing like Panama City or Pensacola, but it was like Okaloosa and Jefferson.
When I think as you build the program itself, like, all the bigger leadership groups, they select regionally. So it's almost like there's only, like you make it a slot,
Right.
like, but it's just trying to it's a good group.
We thought about that, like maybe even partnering with like the coalition, so that every coalition had like one sponsored spot type of thing. But I mean, maybe that's something for us to consider next year. 30 would have been way too many
For sure.
to like feel engaged and heard. So,
Well, it was interesting because I was talking to Susan Gage about the pop-up summits that are about to happen, and there's one over in her area. And she said, well, Chrissy, I realize there's very few FLAEYC members over in this area. FLAEYC doesn't have a presence for them to want to necessarily come and do this. And it's like, if you got to start somewhere. And so that's what that's about. We're having our first pop-up summit, and that's where it's going to be. And hopefully, we'll start making connections that way, but we've got to get out there. And just in the old days, prior to me, Susan Gellens, who was the exec, she actually traveled the state and she went and visited. And it's just something I haven't been able to do because it costs money to be able to do it. But how do we get a presence and have people around the state know us, and do it in such a way? So it's something to think about, not today, but as we move ahead.
Did my I'm sorry, my timer didn't go up. I'm so sorry.
I think it's like 121.
Okay. I've just told them that they need to come back. So hopefully.
They've been pretty good at getting back, and I guess.
No, yeah, because I just don't know why. Oh, I turned my ringer off. I'm sorry. I set my alarm. I did. I swear. I promise. And I totally just turned my ringer off. I was just engaged in the conversation.
Totally.
But yeah, they'll be back in about 25 seconds.
You're doing great, Billy Ann.
Thank you. I hope so.
I think they're enjoying it. I'm watching Dominique. She always writes lots of notes.
I'm taking some notes. They've got some great ideas.
My hand still hurts from all those thank you notes, by the way.
I'll get you. I've like tried a million times to try to figure out how to get thank you notes to come through a printer. Like, you know, like, and they're just usually so heavy, you just can't get them through the printer, but it'd be a lot easier to have somebody sign it if I could just feed them
Yeah.
through.
I did that at Christmas. I actually, when I ordered my thank you cards at Christmas, I ordered it with language already written.
Yep. Smart. Welcome back. Hope you guys had a good little kind of closeout focused conversation. We're just going to go dive into it. I'd love to hear if you guys were able to identify a challenge and a potential partner to help you solve it, and then additional questions you guys have.
I'll go. I talked about how my school is on the campus of Pinellas Technical College, and how we use the people that are in the early childhood program at PTech as potential employees. We also are across from a high school, and we have started a Reads to Me program where we hire high schoolers to work 20 hours per week at our center, so to become potential employees. So we can kind of see that. And I was talking about how I use my resource from my college. I am still in college. I go to St. Petersburg College. So I am close friends with the dean of the education department there. And I work with her to help staff be able to take classes for professional development.
Awesome. Anybody else?
We're talking in our group about the pandemic and specifically to not only all the rest of our mental health, but for the children. So we're talking about trauma-informed. Trauma kept coming up. So since trauma-informed care is a big topic right now, and we were talking about resources for children on the pandemic. And I said that there's actually a really great resource out there that many educators probably are not aware of out of the University of South Florida. They partner with the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations, which is NCPMI, which basically is the pyramid model, if anybody is familiar with it, which is working to establish to help with children with challenging behaviors. And all the amazing work that they've done over the years, this year, they've now included resources for not only for parents, but for early childhood educators on how to help children through the pandemic courses. Like, what is it like to wear masks? How is school different now than it is from home? So on and so forth. So they offer scripted stories for educators and parents to read with their children and just kind of introduce them to what the new normal is. So I'm going to go ahead right now and I'll put that in the chat box. And
Awesome. No, I'm excited about that resource.
That resource in all ways is all early childhood educators should know about it, because pyramid model innovations are something that really we should be striving to implement in our classrooms anyway. We're setting up our classrooms to prevent challenging behaviors versus having to deal with them after the fact. So that's a resource for that. Like, again, it's out of the University of South Florida in collaboration with Vanderbilt University and the University of Denver at Colorado. Lots of great stuff, but they have specifically done some resources for trauma-informed care and working through COVID. So
awesome. Fantastic. So we've talked about a couple of potential issues and how they can be addressed through some partnerships. Did you guys have any other like outstanding questions or like maybe thoughts as we close out?
I do.
Okay.
This is something that I think of constantly, and every time I have audience with a legislative resource. I try to explore it, but they're sidestepping the issue right about now. 2025, we're supposed to be at $15 an hour as the minimum pay. I know most counties and the federal government have already jumped to that. As private providers, I'm looking for a conversation or a resource to further explore the conversation of how do we get there? Because we don't have an ad valorem tax. We don't have taxes on the municipality that we can add to our budgets. And parents are already cramped to some degree with the amount of tuition that we charge them to provide a service to their children. So I'm looking for a conversation to talk about how do we get ahead of this curve to help private providers get to that minimum of $15 an hour and still able to pay their bills and keep their doors open. That's the conversation that's looming in my head.
You know, Sharon, that sounds like a great topic for a whole other call. But I think that you guys are unique and that, or not unique, but you guys with the business community, like the business community in general, I think is trying to work through that problem. So this may be a great opportunity to tie in a strategic partnership with your local chamber and your business to see how, you know, because you're not any different than another business. You know, you may actually have less budget than some of those businesses do. But a lot of the issues you're going to have to work through from an HR perspective and just a profitability perspective are the same struggles that the local businesses are going to have to do. So it sounds like a good opportunity for a strategic partnership there, especially locally.
Thanks.
Well, I know we're coming to a close, so I want to be respectful of all of your time. I so enjoyed the time with you guys today. I hope that there's something, at least one thing that you can take away with you that you found helpful, or maybe it made you think about things in a different way. I think it's always important to get ourselves out of our comfort zone. I so appreciated all of your perspectives as well. It's always nice to come and teach and actually learn. So that was awesome. My contact information is below. If there's anything you want to follow up on or a resource you want to share, I love that. If you're on the Twitter too, I mostly just post about my dog and Florida politics, but I would love to connect with you there. And I'm really proud of you guys for sticking with this. I know you have a lot of commitments, and so being a part of a leadership cadre like this is only going to make your communities better and your organization stronger. So thank you again for having me, Chris and Holly and group. And with that, I'll hand it back over to the bosses.
First, she said the bosses, so I'm waiting for you to jump in on that.
What I have to say is, once again, it was wonderful. Thank you, Billy Ann, for all your insight and such. Sharon, what you're talking about, I think it is definitely a strategic partnership needs to be formed throughout, so we can think about how we're going to handle the cost of living increases, which on one hand are needed, on the other side have the ability to cripple things. So we need to really work on that, and I appreciate your thoughts on it. I hope everybody has a good Memorial Day weekend and takes time to enjoy themselves and relax a little bit on a 3-day weekend if you can. And we'll see you next week, right, Holly?
Yes, ma'am. So just as a quick reminder, we are not meeting this Friday, so that if you are able to take maybe an extra day or buzz off a little bit earlier on Friday to kind of expand that long weekend, that is of course gifting to you. We will be back next Wednesday, and I'm actually going to be your instructor talking about public speaking, how to stay on message, pivoting appropriately and what that means. Very excited to take everything that you've learned thus far and incorporating it into that pitch perfect opportunity when you're going out to build those strategic partnerships using the templates that Billy Ann has provided. She dropped a couple of links in the chat. In true fashion, I will be uploading those files directly into our shared drive. And I also started a new file that just says links shared. So if you missed grabbing the link that Jenny shared to the pyramid model, or last week's link to that Jamboard that Raquel set up for us, you'll find that those links are there. As always, myself and Chris, we are available to you if you have questions, suggestions, comments, concerns, any of that. And I will be following up again today with a link to the evaluation, and look forward to seeing you guys next week. And side note, Dominique just said Canva. I'll drop a link to you and feel free to reach out to me. It's a super fun. They have a free version for graphic design for non-graphic designers. That's the
It's
best
awesome.
way of,
Actually, I did my presentation on Canva.
yeah, it's super fun. I have all like the expensive, like, you know, graphic designer software that I could use, but I also have the Canva app, so I can literally switch on the go and like make edits to things. It's fantastic for social media. It's fantastic for slide presentations. And the more and more you get into it, the more features that it adds so that you can do some pretty advanced graphic design work in it. I'll drop that into the link shared as well. And with that, any kind of final thoughts? Thank you again, Billy Ann. Really appreciate your expertise and contribution to this. She said yes, guys. I just want to point that out. At the very beginning, she was talking about opportunities, right? Say yes whenever you have the opportunity, and she did. And we are very grateful for it. Thank you so much, Billy Ann.
Thanks,
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Have a good weekend.
Bye, thank you.